Welcome to the Cyber Executive Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology, leadership, and cybersecurity. I am your host, Marc Ashworth, and today we're joined by James Pham, CEO of Opsin, a company leading the charge in AI-driven security. We'll be diving in one of the most pressing questions in tech today. How do we secure artificial intelligence as it becomes deeply embedded in every aspect of business and society? From trust and ethics to real world threats, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. James, thank you for joining me today on the Cyber Executive Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm a big fan of yours, and I'm very excited to be on your podcast. So appreciate that you take the time to chat and everything. Yeah.
Wonderful. And we're definitely excited about having you here. But before we dive in, quick favor, if you're enjoying the show, hit the follow button on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to share the Cyber Executive with your friends, coworkers, or anyone else. Let's spread the cyber love. All right. Okay. So, James, Opsin's doing cutting edge work at the intersection of AI and security. From your perspective, what are the biggest emerging challenges in securing AI driven systems today? I know there's a lot out there, but what's some of the big ones that you're worried about?
Yeah, definitely. I think that people usually got very excited about Gen AI. Everyone would have their hands on ChatGPT at least. So everyone is super excited about benefits, but not many people think about like the security impact of it, especially when it comes to enterprise where your treasure trove is actually your data, right? Like the data is actually the very critical things in the enterprise. So there are a couple of challenges in securing AI-driven system. It's actually like a spectrum of things, right? Like so, basically in AI security, it is divided into two camps. So one is out of the box Gen AI system like Microsoft 365 Copilot, ChatGPT Enterprise, Google Gemini, Clean, and all of that stuff. The other camp is like the Gen AI tools that you build for yourself, right? Like you embed it within your products, right? A lot of companies actually develop it themselves. So in each of the camp, there are different risks in it. But if you take a broad stroke into it, right? Like so there are two, if you break down a little bit further, there are actually two different components. So one is the data itself that the AI is accessing. Then the second is the AI system itself.
Mhm.
So we can dive into a little bit deeper into each of these different vectors as we go along. But some of the risks that you probably hear a lot, which is prompt injection, model poisoning. So that more applicable to the build your own kind of Gen AI system. But like the other thing is like data leakage and all that stuff, shadow AI and all that stuff is more on the out of the box Gen AI tool. So it kind of divided that way, and then each of those have different risks, and then we can dive deeper into each of these as we kind of go along the podcast.
Yeah, we'll touch in on those each a little bit. So, from your perspective, what makes securing AI systems fundamentally different from securing traditional IT or cloud environments?
Yeah, I think one of the very interesting things is that in IT we always have this deterministic system. Like, okay, if you have certain rules, you expect the IT system to follow it. Like by kind of like very deterministically, right? And then there's the Gen AI system, which is more on the probabilistic side of the house. So if you ask it a questions, the answer might be very different each time that you ask it. So then it fundamentally different than the traditional system where the outcome of you have an input, you put to a system, it will spit out like the exact output. But with AI, it's like you put the same inputs, but the output might be different. So that might be a little bit harder for you to secure AI system. That's the first thing. The second thing is AI is probably the most powerful system out there. So what that means is that in the past, right, like it, it take people a long time to ingest and progress data. Like all these systems that you have, right, it take a long time to do that. But with AI, what they have is a vector search capabilities. So what that means is that your petabyte of data can be converted into a vector DB, and then AI can instantly kind of digest and kind of like pick up relevant information to answer your question and stuff like that. So the second thing is it's actually a very powerful system, and kind of governing that, securing it, make it a little bit harder in that way. And then third thing is that securing AI system become fundamentally different because how easy it is to get into everyone's hands.
Hmm.
So if you think about like the cloud adoption, right, it takes a while for people to get into the cloud, adopt the cloud, because not everyone can have the technical capability to spin up a virtual machine.
Yeah.
With AI, whether you want it or not, probably everyone in your company are using it. So it's so easy. Like the entry barrier for someone to adopt AI is like this low. But cloud is like higher, and if you think about the previous wave of evolution, the internet is like this high, right? Because you have to have all these fiber cable to be able to do that. So what that means is that securing AI system also become a little bit challenging because there's so many of those out there. And then like it's just not about this one particular system, but it's like what about like all other system out there? Like how are you going to secure it? So to answer your question, from my perspective, what makes securing AI system fundamentally different is one, the nature of it, very non-deterministic. Two is how powerful it is, and then three, how easy it is. It's both powerful and easy to use, so which make it very dangerous from security standpoint. Very helpful for productivity though.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you mentioned about the vector databases. I was just reading some articles on that just recently this week to try to get a understanding of the difference between like a traditional database and the other. I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around on how that all works. I think that's just absolutely amazing, that whole thought process and stuff. So it's very, very cool technology on the underlying component of it and stuff. So, with that, AI models, as like you mentioned, are only good as their data, so if it's being poisoned, that always makes it worse. So how concerned should we be about data poisoning and manipulation during model training? Is it more of a concern whenever it's more of a public facing model versus a more containerized one within your environment? Or is it the same old adage of data, junk in, junk out? So
Exactly, chung in, chung out. And maybe let me take a step back, right, and explain what data poisoning and manipulation is. So essentially, a lot of the models rely on the user inputs to be able to feed back into the model for training. It's just because a lot of the data set that we have is not enough. So they usually rely on the end user inputs and output to be able to train the system. So the attack vector is some malicious actors can feed bunch of chunks into your system, and so when the time that you pick up all these chunks to pick up all these data to train your own model, then you kind of screw it up because someone can repeatedly feed wrong information to your model. And so this attack vector a lot of time impact the second camp. If you remember the previous kind of divide that I mentioned. There's out of
mhm.
box Gen AI tools, and then there's your own tools. Right? Like let's say your company build your own models, and then there's some users just keep feeding stuff into it, right? So that's where you should be very worried about it, and not just about model poisoning, but also about like prompt injection and all that stuff. So if you build your own things, you have to be very worried about it, as opposed to like let's say if you use like out of the box tools like Microsoft 365 Copilot, Clean, and all these SaaS that have their own Gen AI embedded in it. Usually, they have certain guardrails around that. What that means is they could have prompt injection guardrails, they could have model poisoning, protection guardrails, and all that stuff. So if I'm a user of those two, I would be less concerned, and probably there's nothing for you to do anyway. If you use out of the box Gen AI tools, there's nothing for you to do, right? Like
Mhm.
you don't control anything. But if it is build your own model, that's where you should be concerned. But one thing that you should keep in mind is that for someone to effectively manipulate your models, it actually takes quite a bit of resources for them to do that. Meaning that they have to have, because at the end of the day, when you take all that data set and then train your model, you need to have large enough samples to do it, right? So then the attacker need to overwhelm your system with all these bad inputs. So it actually takes quite a bit of effort to kind of orchestrate and make that happen. And it is scary, but it's not that scary like people depict. Like for example, like answer a wrong question about a history and stuff like that. That happened, but it's actually pretty tough.
Right, right. So, along that line, adversarial examples can trick even advanced models. So, how can we build resilience into the AI systems to detect and monitor those model type attacks?
Yeah, it can be a little bit tricky, right? So I think there are a couple of things that usually I've seen people doing it. So one is sampling. What that means is that again, in Gen AI, it's a probabilistic game. Right? Like you pick certain random samples of the inputs and you inspect it yourself. So like almost like having the human in the loop to be able to see that, to be able to kind of like detect if someone trying to do like model poisoning or like manipulation. And then the second thing that I've seen people doing is they have another model to watch the model. It's kind of funny, but it's like you having a judge, like an LM judge, a judging model to be able to look into that and see, okay, like, hey, it's look like these inputs, they're trying to manipulate the models, right? Basically kind of like having a judge, like an LM judge, to be able to detect that and kind of alert if that happens. And again, it become all of this become very messed up game, right? Like where there's an LM monitor, an LM, and all that stuff. So I think we are living in a world where it become a little bit more futuristic in that regard. But I think that definitely help, right? So sampling is one. The other thing is definitely having another LM to be able to look at that and judge that. And then the third thing is obviously like a lot of organization have data set that they like what we call like even in our own system we have something called golden data set.
Hmm.
So
Kind of
that
like a
means that,
golden image that you have for building a server or workstation. So, a golden data set as well, huh?
exactly. So it's just fancy name, but basically
Yeah.
is the basic is if I feed in this input, I expect this output. So it's not just about the training detection, but also about the post training. So like if I feed certain input into the model, I expect this outcome, right? So like having like some sort of golden data set that you can repeatedly test after each run or each training or each iteration is certainly helpful, right? So those are the three techniques, and of course there are more technical metrics that people use to monitor this model trip and stuff like that. But usually, those are the three things that I've seen people doing.
Okay. Great. So, you know, ultimately, there's got to be some sort of governance around AI. And so, who do you think should ultimately be responsible for AI security? Is it the developers, the deploying organizations, regulators, all the above? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just like everyone else, right? Just like the cloud model as well, right? It probably everyone responsibility. It take a village to have a secure system, and even then, it's not even secure.
Very true.
So I think like you ultimately responsible for AI security, and first and foremost is definitely the developers, just
Hmm.
because the developers are the one who kind of like the mastermind behind the entire thing, right? Like they need to have certain built-in guardrails, right? So we'll
Hmm.
have to start with that first, right? Like which is that hey, I know some attack vectors already, so I already have guardrails built in. Of course, as a human, we cannot predict every new attack vectors that are coming, but at least the one that as a developer, you should have the thoroughness, the thoughtfulness to put in these guardrails. And then of course, along the way, people always find holes in your work, right? It's it never like be like a seal package. It's always some hole somewhere. It's just that you don't know it yet, right?
Hmm.
So then that cascaded into the deploying organizations, right? So like I think you asked me a question about like all these monitoring capabilities, right? So
Hmm.
like you should be able to monitor it, right? Especially from misuse, especially like the misuse actually pretty common, pretty popular in the out of the box GenAI tools. Like
Hmm.
people can go and look for sensitive data in the system, for example, because you to the point that I mentioned earlier, AI system is this powerful system that can search across the tenant in seconds. Right? Like someone might just go and look for sensitive data that they have access to but not supposed to, for example. So then it's become the deploying organization responsibility to be able to say, okay, the developer did their job, right? They block it from prompt injection, model poisoning, and all that attack vectors, but like some of the nuance attack, like for example, like find me Siri data or like find me password information, those can be both an attack or can both be a legitimate use case. So it becomes very difficult for the model developer to be able to see that, to detect that, or to because it vary across organizations. So then it become deploying organization to be able to say, okay, within my organization, this should not happen. That employee keep doing that, which is not good, right? So then it becomes the job of the deploying organization to be able to kind of tackle attack vector because there are multiple attack vectors, right? And then lastly, I think when it comes to regulators, I think it's a tricky and a big debate between like the US and Europe. Like, do you need an EU AI Act or do you need a US equivalent of it? Like, what is it? Like, because it's funny when the government come in into a free market and try to regulate it, they kind of distort the market.
Hmm.
But if they don't do that, right, like bad actors are gonna go haywire and do funny things, right? So I actually don't know, right? I think that picking the right moment to regulate is also very important. But if you regulate too early, you're gonna kill innovation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to have some sort of guardrails so that you can prompt each of the actor to act responsibly. But you don't want to do it too early. You don't want to do it too late. So it's a little bit of an art for me.
Yeah. So, one thing that a lot of CISOs and organizations are concerned about is supply chain attacks and everything. And as we're using more and more of these AI tools, and there's agents being brought down and other software to be installed, and not just the browser ones, but even from a browser perspective, something being introduced on there, how do we manage the growing supply chain attack when it comes to AI? There's so many open source tools and third party integrations. How do we manage that?
Yeah, I think supply chain attack is a very tricky one because a lot of time, like the AI system is not using a single model. I mean, you may go to a company and you interact with an interface, but behind that interface, there might be like hundreds of models, and there's this concept of an ensemble model that have like multiple expert models in it. Like for example, when you ask about math question, it may go to like a math model. If you go ask about geography question, it may go to like a geography model. So in the front, like for example, ChatGPT just go, hey, I have GPT-5, but under GPT-5 there might be like hundreds of models beneath it,
Hmm.
and it's a combination of like a traditional Gen AI models, but also like some very old kind of machine learning that happened in the past, right? Because not everything you need Gen AI. So then become like supply chain attack on each of these model become like very very difficult to trace down in terms of like what like where the gaps are in each of the model because there could be 100. But and I think on top of it, like because LLM is inherently non-deterministic, so actually like detecting those are actually pretty tough. So I think like from the model perspective, um, looking at the inputs and the outputs is probably the best judgment. Like think of it like a human being, right? You don't know what the person is thinking, but if you give them a task, see how they perform, and you judge like, hey, here's a task, here's the expectation, here's the KPI, and here's the output, right? So that's how you judge. But that's just on the model, right? I think supply chain attack also have to do all the things around the model too, right? Because
Hmm.
you think about it, right? A typical system is nowadays a rack system is very popular. Retrieval augmented generations model. It helps to incorporate some proprietary data from the enterprise into the model so that the model can answer meaningfully, right? Like Microsoft 365 Copilot is a typical RAG model, but also like some Q&A model for your product launches and stuff like that. It's also a RAG model. So then it's just not about the model, which is like GPT-5, but it's also about the RAG, which is like what's the system prompts that were
Hmm.
used, what was the data that people are trying to use that was fed into the model, and then how is it integrating with the broader SaaS interface. So it become like you have to continue to protect these traditional SaaS kind of applications, but there's a new attack surface which is the Gen AI that jump in, right? Like, so you have to keep protecting this SaaS thing, but you also have to protect these new factors, which is the Gen AI model the system prompt, the data that they are accessing, and all that stuff. So I think supply chain attack is actually a pretty tricky business, and the way that you go about it is obviously you continue to do the scanning like you do with the traditional SaaS, but also when it comes to Gen AI, because you cannot really scan things there. Because there might be malicious prompt that embed into all these neurons of the models, and the only way that you can kind of control that is to be able to have an input, see what the output coming out, and kind of validate that. So I think maybe there's different techniques, but those are the things that I've seen working a lot. And by the way, I've been working on machine learning and all of that stuff for a long time, like 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah, great. So, AI is changing the security landscape both in terms of new opportunities for the defense and new risks for exploitation. So, what's your thoughts on that? How can we where do you see this going, and how can organizations adapt to this as we continue to see these opportunities for change?
Yeah. And it's funny because the attackers usually are the one who more creative and adopt AI or like whatever new technology first, and usually that would prompt the defender to adopt the same thing. Uh, so I think that pretty much the patterns that we're seeing nowadays. Anyway, like there's someone kind of sowing an attack, then the rest of the group will react to it. Will start with the defense, right? So. Uh, I think there's a lot of new opportunities for enterprises to use AI to help themselves, right? Like some of the not just with the new attack vectors, right? Obviously, you need to protect that, but using AI to help yourself with the old attack vectors too, right? I think there's a lot of AI SOC analysts that help you kind of analyze all these like bunch of alerts and kind of triage and find the root cause and help you prioritize and all that stuff. Um, of course, the I have question mark about like how effective those are just because it's too noisy, but that's a separate topic. Um, so I think that for the defense, there's a lot of opportunities for you to use the new techniques, but kind of like help yourself become more efficient in terms of like defending against our attacks. At the same time, you need to stay ahead of the curve with like whatever new out there that people are attacking. So I think that's where we're going. It's a catch up game, right? It's always the attacker go first and the defenders, and we take turns in a way.
Okay. So, as a CEO, how do you balance innovation and speed to market with the need for responsible AI governance and cybersecurity oversight?
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, as a CEO, especially for cybersecurity company, my position is very different from a CEO for a SaaS company. the, the reason I say that is because imagine you yourself at a cybersecurity company and you got hacked.
Hmm.
That would be quite bad.
Right.
That would be
Yeah,
the end of
that's not good. Yeah.
that will be almost like the end of the company. As opposed to like if say that you are a CEO of a SaaS company, it's like, oh, this company just launched this very innovative feature, amazing, but they lack some security thing. I was like, okay, yeah, we'll forgive them because they're not really in security; they are in like finance, right? For example, like this new fintech company that come out with these amazing techniques or products, right? Then they can be forgive if they. I mean, it's not good, but it's not like the end of the company journey. So for us, which is a cybersecurity company specifically for Gen AI, I think that we place a little bit more on the oversight. I would say on the responsible AI governance, just
Hmm.
because the nature of the business that we're in. But at the same time, we are a startup, so we need to move fast and innovate. We cannot like we cannot put like the entire EU AI Act on ourselves and then it's like cannot move because we don't even understand what the regulation are. so I think for us usually the way it works is that we'll see what the market needs and innovate, and then from there kind of like okay we're gonna run fast but we need to have certain guardrails around it to protect. Back to your to your earlier question about like who ultimately responsible for AI security, and the answer is pretty much everyone, including the developers. But it comes with the developer first. In this case, we are the developers.
Hmm.
So we have to build in certain guardrails into our product and platform to be able to detect if something funny happen or some risk occur. So I think it's a spectrum like this, where like someone who don't really care about security to like someone who's like way too cautious, and then we need to be somewhere in the middle. And then where you are, depending on the stage of the company too. If you are like very big company, probably you stay more on the cautious side. But if you are like a smaller company, it probably less. So it's a spectrum in a way.
Yeah. Great. And when you're working on AI and security it requires a lot of cross-disciplinary talent, maybe data scientists, engineers, cyber experts, and especially as you're in your case, you're developing the tools for that. But so how do you cultivate a culture that bridge those skill sets effectively? Because I mean, those are, some extreme differences between someone that's just looking at the data. The engineer says that we need to do it this way, and you got the security guys going, "No, you can't do it that way because that's bad." So how do you bridge that culture and make them work really good?
Yeah, and I think this had to do with the previous question as you asked
Hmm.
about the balance between innovation and oversight, right? As well, right? So I think that the way that bridge those skill sets is to align everyone around the customer needs. So instead of like, okay, we need to build this product and features, but just tell a story about like, okay, so this is what customer need. These are the things that they are doing, and then from that story, figure out how you fit into that pictures. And one of the thing is, um, one of the culture that we built at Opsin is around transparencies, which is we have like a radical transparency. So meaning that everything is um, is public, meaning that when we discuss certain topics, it's public so that people can chime in and know why the decision are made, right? Like for example, a data scientist might not be familiar with the engineering technical aspect, but they see all the threat about the engineering, discuss about like how they are solving this, and then there's a security guy can chime in and then see all the discussion going on. So I think that help bridge the gap, right? It by you need to have a common goal, which is like what's the customer pain point or the problem, and then the second thing that you need is to have a culture where things are very transparent, right? Like anyone want to chime in with their expertise, feel free, they are welcome to do that, right? And so like cultivate that culture to be able to build a bridge across is important. And maybe the third thing is probably like, because not by design, but we are probably too small to have so many different personas. So
Hmm.
probably the guy who is an engineer is also a security expert,
Yeah.
so that helped too. It's not by
Yeah.
design, but it helps.
Right, definitely. So, given how rapidly AI threats are evolving, do you think there's enough collaboration across the industry, or are we still too silo in our approach to AI security?
Yeah, I think we're probably still in early stage where I feel like there's a lot of hype but not a lot of kind of content and materials in terms of collaboration among each other to be able to effectively defend. And I think it may not have to do with the community, but it also have to do with where we are, right? Which is that a lot of the risks that we talk about can be hypothetical risk,
Mm.
and it scare people off, but it's not really a like, we talk a lot about like, for example, moral poisoning and all that stuff. Like it sounds very scary, but in reality, for you to do it, you need a government state to do it. So it's actually like that's the stage where we are. And one of the things that I keep telling my other founder friend is, how in cybersecurity we sell on risk,
Mhm.
which is that, hey, here are the risks. But a lot of time, like people make it scarier than it is. And so I think um, we are still way too silo in our approach to AI security. It's just because of how nascent the industry is and how kind of the risks are still kind of forming. So we're at a stage where you're forming and norming and all of that stuff. So
Mhm.
this is going in parallel with the end customer themselves, right? The end customer is still figuring out like, what am I going to do with this AI stuff? I heard everyone is doing it. I should do it, but what the heck am I doing? So I think like we kind of like forming and norming from the cybersecurity lane, but on the customer lane, they also like, okay, what am I gonna do with this? Like, so
Yeah,
I think it just takes time for all of us to gel together and like, okay, here's what customer are doing, here's the risk, and here how we protect. But I suspect it will take maybe two more 2 3 more years to kind of for it to become like a cloud security industry where you kind of things are more defined.
yeah. And which kind of gets me into where do you think in the next 2 to 5 years, where what does secure AI look to you or look like to you? And, what should organizations be doing to prepare for that for the future? Now, granted, the way AI is changing, a year is like 5 years in regular technology terms, and maybe even 10 years. So, I mean,
Yeah,
so it might be difficult there, but kind of what's your thoughts, kind of looking ahead here?
yeah, yeah. You're absolutely right. Right, the way AI changing is very rapidly. You just think about ChatGPT. They are probably like 4 years ago. No,
Hmm.
4 years ago.
Yeah, about three, isn't it? When it really kind of hit big. So when it 22.
Yeah. So the entire industry is very new, right? To be honest, about a year ago, people don't even know what agent is. And now it's like, oh, agentic AI. And it's funny because a lot of our customers actually have agents in their environment right now.
Yeah.
And I would suspect that a lot of new innovation is coming out. So you have agents now. You have browsers like OpenAI to release these browsers, and then you just have like so much research going on right now, and so much money that's putting in these industries. All like Nvidia become like suddenly become like a biggest business, like like a biggest
Most
company.
valuable company, yeah, in the world.
Yeah, there's just so much money, so much talent that is floating around. It's become a little bit unpredictable on like what the outcome of all this, right? I think
Mhm.
the tricky business of cybersecurity is that we need to kind of know what product we are protecting against first. So the product come first, and then I was like, okay,
Yeah.
what the rest? And then then security come in. So I think looking ahead 5 years, I think secure AI look like to me. I would say that the way that I always envision how AI work is think of it like a human being, right? Like you have an input, you have an output. Think of it like an organization, right? There are different departments within the organization. There are different employees. Everyone is on different KPIs, and you should, as a security perspective, you should have certain boundaries between each of these departments and people, and each of these agents should have certain KPIs, like what's the input, what the expected output. And I think that probably the way that how we are going to secure and govern AI moving forward is not by inspecting like what is going on in the middle, but like what's the input, what the output, and what are all the things around it. So essentially, what we're doing is we're controlling the everything around the AI, but not the AI itself. It's a black box. It had always been, right? I start with like traditional machine learning model. It's a black box with all these neurons and stuff like that. And then this Gen AI is definitely a black box. So I think for organization to be able to prepare for that futures, like the only way is to stay up to date because
Yeah.
today's agents, I don't know what tomorrow is. It might be they don't even need a laptop anymore. Like they don't even need a user interface anymore. Basically, you just interact voice with your
Hmm.
devices, and that's how it works. Like it sounds very futuristic, but if that's the case, then the way that you protect your organization is different, right? So I think that we need to evolve with the entire thing. And the other thing that maybe outside of the scope of the podcast is with all this money things putting into the industries, there's gonna be a high expectation for the outcome of the industries. Who knows? In 5 years, there might be a bubble that busts. So
Right.
that might happen as well. So like you just like don't really know because there's so many unpredictabilities around like what the future holds.
Great. Well, One of the things I do with all my guests is I ask about the same three type of questions, and so I would like to do that with you for right here at the end. So, James, what is something that the security industry could do better?
Yeah, I think some of the point that you mentioned is about silos and how we kind of like function
Hmm.
separately. I think ability to kind of like gel together and work together and collaborate more. I think that that would be super helpful. I think like everyone go on a podcast or like speak publicly would talk about, hey, how I save the organization, how I protect the organization, but not many talk about like, okay, I just got hacked.
Yeah,
Right? I think like people, I think in the cybersecurity industry, it focus a lot on the positives that I sometimes I think it might be helpful for us as an industry to be more tolerant to failures is
yeah,
what I would say, because like all this regulation about punishing CISO because they have a breach is not really helpful, you know.
yeah,
So I think that as a security industry, what we could do better is to have more tolerance for failures and learn from it, and kind of like we are in it together, right? Like we collaborate and not really punishing the people who kind of may be subjected to certain attack and stuff like that. That way, like people will never learn, right? Like, so we
right.
never hear about a story. All we hear is, like, hey, here's a good story. You know, it's like,
So, what's something that you're tired of hearing about? And I think you kind of said that a little bit here, but maybe there's something else.
yeah, I think what's something that I'm tired of. I read these things really recently about like how human is the wicked links in the cybersecurity space. It is true. It is true. But at the same time, the entire thing is human. Like, if it's a wicked link, so does that mean that you assume that we're always going to be hacked and stuff like that? So I think, yeah, it's true. But I think that's something that we can also say that human can be the strongest link too.
Hmm.
Like, if you educate them well, you kind of help strengthen the organization, they can actually help you. Because like I was talking to another CISO, and how he has these organic detectors. So that means that if something goes wrong in the organization, the people actually go and tell him like, hey, like I accidentally see this sensitive document that I'm not supposed to. So I think that the technology may come behind, but if the human kind of have the mindset of security and come in and help you, they can actually be the strongest link in your organization if you do it correctly. So I think we should get away from that mindset. Is that it's a wicked link, like we need to treat them like they know nothing and stuff like that too. Like, okay, we can get them to help us to do our
Hmm.
job and protect them. Yeah.
Great. What are the latest trends in security or privacy that you're actively monitoring right now?
Well, obviously, I'm in AI, so
And enough said, right?
so so obviously I think that all the agentic work is amazing, right? Like, to be honest, a couple of years ago when I was at MIT studying machine learning, it was like, I still remember it was a couple of handwritten images, and then the machine learning algorithm supposed to recognize, is it number two or is it number three, right? And now fast forward for today, we have agents who can do bookings and doing all of that and stuff like that. I think that's gonna be a big privacy gaps gonna happen, because just a human alone, we make mistake, right? What made a human? So we make mistake in cybersecurity. We make mistake in like setting permission, for example. Now imagine you have like hundreds of agents running on your behalf. It should magnify the the consequences, or the gaps in your system. So I think it remains to be seen like how this new agentic world is gonna pan out. Like, actively from an Opsin perspective, we're actively monitoring it. We actually have products on that front, but it's still, like I said, like still remain to be seen. And to my previous example, like the customer is still figuring out what to do with agents. We are figuring out how to protect it. So I think it could be an interesting topic to kind of monitor and see it.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, that wraps up today's episode of the Cyber Executive. A huge thank you, James, for sharing your thoughts and insights on challenges and opportunities in securing AI. I appreciate having you on here today.
Yeah, likewise, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. Stay tuned for more conversations with leaders shaping the future of cybersecurity, technology, and leadership. Until next time, stay informed, stay secure, and stay ahead. Thank you.